Chapter 473. That's right. He nodded as if he had experienced the same thing. Luo Pa knew that the shot just now was fired by the ghost sniper team who had rushed over to provide support. From a distance of at least 700 meters, one shot was able to hit the opponent's saber without hurting anyone. This marksmanship was really amazing. Luo Pa and Kong Jia both sighed at the beauty of this shot, not to mention the Han captives. After witnessing this amazing marksmanship, they were all dumbfounded. Then, their faces were filled with terror. They finally understood why Hong Jin said that they could not defeat the mercenaries. As for Zhang Qingli, who was standing there with a look of fairness, he stood there with a dumbfounded expression. However, when he came back to his senses, it was as if he did not know anything. Just like now, his entire body was trembling. Clearly, he was greatly frightened by this shot. Even the captains were behaving like this, let alone the ordinary soldiers. Out of fear, someone threw down the weapon in his hand and shouted, "Don't shoot me, I surrender." Then, more people threw their weapons to the ground and squatted down. This was like a plague, causing more and more people to throw down their weapons and squat down. After a while, even the captains were squatting down. After all, no one was not afraid of death. Especially when there was no need to fight to the death and there was no great hatred between them, surrendering was not shameful. Close to 40,000 Han captives surrendered just like that, and things went unexpectedly smoothly. Following the 2nd Regiment Commander Luo Pa's order, more and more mercenaries appeared in the surrounding rainforest. They came out in all directions, coming in front of the Han captives and starting to capture them. News of victory could always shake people's hearts. Even Yang Chendong, who had expected things to go smoothly, was so excited when he heard the news from the scouts at the front. Good, since things are going so smoothly, let's carry out the second step of the plan and start moving. Guangnan Prefecture. At this moment, it was already empty. For days after Hong Jin left the city with 10,000 Jiaoji soldiers and 40,000 Han captives, without receiving any news from the front lines, Wang Gengwang finally couldn't hold himself back and made his move. He could not wait any longer. He led the remaining 30,000 Jiaoji soldiers out of the city and charged toward the Langsun region. It was no wonder that Wang Gengwang gave up on Guangnan Prefecture. Scouts had reported that Wang Mubin's subordinates in the nearby Shiping were marching toward them. Previously, when he had 100,000 soldiers, he was not afraid of the Mu clan's army. But now, he only had 30,000 soldiers. Even he could not believe that he could still defend Guangnan Prefecture. Rather than putting themselves in danger, it would be better to retreat first and join up with the other troops. Once they had enough strength, they would be able to take back the city. Feeling wronged, Wang Gengwang led 20,000 soldiers into the Langsun region. The fact that there was no news from 2 armies in a row made him a lot smarter. When the army entered the mountains, they sent out many scouts to scout the situation in front of them and prevent them from falling into a trap set by the mercenaries. But no matter how careful Wang Gengwang was and how many scouts he sent out, there was no news at all. It was not just the mercenaries. Even the 70,000 men he sent out did not receive any news. It was as if they had all disappeared into thin air. The mercenaries only had 10,000 men. It was possible for them to disappear into the vast rainforest. But what about his 70,000 men? Where did they go? They couldn't have all been killed, right? It had been less than 10 days since the beginning. Even if there were 70,000 pigs in the rainforest, it was impossible for all of them to be captured. Wang Gengwang, who could not figure out what was going on, was frightened. His army slowed down even more. He sent out more and more scouts. Many of them were elites who were very familiar with the rainforest. He did not believe that they could not find any clues. The people who knew the rainforest the best were the Jiaoji people who had lived here since young. With their rich experience and common sense, they did find some useful clues. However, they paid a heavy price for it. For example, every time they were about to find a clue, the scouts they sent out would step on a landmine and be sent to the afterlife. This wasn't the first time such a thing had happened. In fact, it would happen dozens or even hundreds of times in a single day. As a result, every single scout had to be extremely careful when they took a step forward, fearing that they would step on a landmine that could send them to the afterlife. Just like that, they finally found a huge mound of dirt on the 7th day after entering the mountains. Yuan rushed there and ordered people to dig up the fresh-looking mound of dirt. What they saw were countless corpses. From their clothes to their figures, one could tell that they were all Jianghu soldiers. As they dug deeper, the mound of dirt grew bigger. On the 10th day, they found Yuan Yongyang's corpse. Although it was badly decomposed, Yuan still recognized his nephew. He was furious and swore that he would kill the mercenaries to avenge his nephew. Under the loud roar, the scouts found a new clue. They found some traces, which should be left behind by the army during their march. Although they tried to cover it up, they were still seen through by the experienced scouts. Looking at the direction of the army, they were heading straight for the capital of Jianghu, Hanoi. "Are you sure that the army is heading towards Hanoi?" Yuan asked with cold sweat on his forehead. He suppressed his sadness when he heard the scouts report. "Yes, we are sure that they are heading towards Hanoi," the new scout captain said confidently. They really have guts." When Yuan said these words, there was some admiration in his voice. However, he quickly reacted and said, "Immediately send the most elite people to inform Hanoi of what happened here. At the same time, inform His Majesty and ask them to prepare to face the enemy. My troops will follow behind and attack from both sides. We will completely kill them in our Jianghu territory." Yuan gritted his teeth as he spoke. It was obvious that his nephew's death was a huge blow to him. The scout captain agreed and went to make the arrangements. More than 10 elite scouts immediately rushed towards Hanoi. They wanted to inform the king of the general's intentions as soon as possible so that the country could be better prepared. Xianan Village. This Xianan County of Vietnam's Quang Ninh province was just a village near the sea. The entire village only had about 400 people. With such a population, it was already considered a large village. At this moment, the village was bustling with noise and was very busy. The original natives had all become captives and were being transported to the ships. Along with them were 40,000 Han captives. Needless to say, the ones who could do this were the mercenaries. In fact, their leader Yang Chendong was currently drinking tea in a pavilion by the shore. Beside him were Commander Lu Pe, Political Commissar Kong Jia and the rest. Sitting opposite him was indeed the commander of the 2nd Marine Regiment, Nye Tong. They came from the nearby Yongshi Island. Because Commander Gao Xiong had other missions at sea, Nye Tong had the chance to complete the mission of receiving people and delivering equipment. Naturally, they were referring to the 40,000 Han captives. The more developed Crimson City was, the more insufficient the population was. Many of the newly built factories were operated by one person, or even 3 or 4 people. With the addition of these 40,000 people, the pressure could be alleviated. As for delivering equipment, it was naturally weapons and ammunition. War could not do without such things, especially when the mercenaries were alone. After a battle, who knew how much ammunition and grenades they would use? If they could not replenish them in time, it would be very dangerous. Yang Chendong had long considered this problem and came up with the idea of delivering equipment by the seaside. The equipment was delivered early, and the people were pulled onto the ship. Everything was done in an orderly manner. Only then did Nye Tong have time to sit in front of Yang Chendong. Nye Tong was also one of the earliest people to join Leng Feng. He had followed Gao Xiong to Jianghu Mansion to take advantage of the Yang family. After being subdued, he was dead set on following the 6th young master. Furthermore, through his outstanding performance, he became the commander of the 2nd Marine Regiment, a high-ranking officer of the Navy. It seemed that 4 years had passed. Although time had passed, Nie Tong's respect for Yang Chendong had not decreased. On the contrary, it had increased. In particular, Rezken City was getting bigger and bigger. It would not be long before Ryukyu Island became the base of the sixth young master. At this moment, Nie Tong's heart was filled with respect. Nie Tong, this time you transported so much military equipment, Rezken City wouldn't have been emptied out, right? Yang Chendong saw that because they had not been in contact with each other for a long time, Nie Tong was somewhat restrained, so he deliberately reduced this feeling of unfamiliarity through chatting. Being called by Yang Chendong, Nie Tong suddenly stood up from his chair. His action made the 2nd Marine Regiment Commander Luo Pe and Political Commissar Kong Jia also quickly stand up. Before, it was Yang Chendong who ordered them to sit, so they had no choice but to sit, but they also felt like they were sitting on pins and needles. Since Nie Tong stood up first, of course they would not continue to sit down. Hey, you guys should sit down. Seeing the three people all stand up, Yang Chendong smiled and pointed to the chair. Sixth young master, let's stand. It's more comfortable this way. Luo Pe showed a somewhat dumbfounded expression, half pleading. Chapter 474. That's right, that's right. Kong Jia and Nie Tong agreed. Seeing that the three of them were of the same mind, Yang Chendong could not force them to do anything. He simply stood up and walked out of the awning. As he looked at the scene of the Han captives being sent to the ships, he said, Nie Tong, you still haven't answered my question. Replying to the sixth young master's question, these military resources will not affect the overall layout of Crimson City. We already knew that the army would expand, so the military factory has already been expanded twice. With the foundation we laid previously, there are many skilled craftsmen. In addition, through our own products, we are constantly exchanging steel and other materials from other countries and regions. Under the circumstances where we have enough raw materials, the production speed of firearms and ammunition has already doubled. For the time being, it is enough. Hearing Nie Tong speak about the situation of Crimson City, Yang Chendong was filled with emotions. Very good, but we need to have a sense of danger. We need to use our brains and take the initiative. Don't wait until we need to do something. This kind of passive waiting is not good. How about this, when you return, you must represent this young master to pay respect to those craftsmen working on the front lines. Also, tell Yu Qian to reward those who should be rewarded. Don't be stingy, and don't use the methods he used in Great Ming. If you can't give up the child, you can't trap the wolf. You need to look at the big picture and set your sights further. Yes, this subordinate will remember. Nie Tong nodded his head continuously. Since this was the sixth young master's intention, he naturally had to carry it out. He believed that even Yu Qian, who was in charge of Crimson City's administration, would not oppose this. Speaking of Yu Qian, when he first came to Crimson City, he had a very strong resistance. If not for the safety of his family, he would have thrown himself into the sea to commit suicide. But when he really had nothing to do and started to come into contact with this new city, the more he understood, the more attractive it became. After knowing that this was a government that worked for the welfare of the Han people, and after being enlightened by his family and friends, especially when he saw more and more people smiling brightly, he was finally tempted. Upon learning that Yu Qian intended to contribute, Yang Chendong, who was still in the Yang clan in the north, gave the order to hand over the administrative authority of Crimson City to Yu Qian so that he could take a look. It was only administrative power and did not involve the leadership of the military. No matter what ideas Yu Qian had, he would not be able to stir up any waves. In addition, Yang Chendong had personally given the order, so Yu Qian was appointed as the first city lord of Crimson City. Not long after he became the city lord, the originally chaotic Crimson City was put on the right track and became orderly. Many of the work became more orderly, which attracted the praise of everyone, including the military. Who said that the ancients were pedantic? It was only because of their environment that they had no choice but to do certain things. Once they were given a new environment, they would still be able to do a lot of work. This was the formidable side of capable ministers. It was precisely because of Yu Qian in Crimson City that some of the original plans were quickly developed. Coupled with the full cooperation of everyone, Yang Chendong had the ability and strength to fight the war in Jiaoji. When it came to war, there were simply too many things to pay attention to. There were simply too many things that needed to be prepared, especially when it came to logistics. Since ancient times, there were people who said that war was actually a war of attrition. With sufficient logistical support and a natural advantage in firepower, Yang Chendong decided to make use of this opportunity to enter Jiaoji and exterminate them. That's right, Yang Chendong had never thought of compromising or taming after conquering. There were too many things he needed to do. It was just a small Jiaoji, and it wasn't worth his time. Back to the topic, Nie Tong saw that Yang Chendong seemed to be in a good mood. He thought for a while and made up his mind. Sixth young master, do you think that our navy can help in the war against Jiaoji? If it's really not possible, can we take down the Shang dynasty on Ryukyu Island? Actually, Nie Tong wanted to ask when they would attack Japan. But after thinking about it, with the current strength of Crimson City, even if they took down Japan, they would not have enough people to occupy it. Since that was the case, it was better to put it aside for now. There's no rush. The matter of the Shang dynasty can wait. Right now, we should focus on building the foundation. Without enough people, it would be a waste to take it down now. As for the matter of fighting Jiaoji, your navy can help. How about this, after sending the people back to Crimson City, you can return and attack Jewel Island first. Then, you can take down Haifeng Town. In the future, it will be more convenient for us to lead the army. After that, you can use the advantage of the cannons on your ships to suppress Jiuzhen Prefecture and Rinan Prefecture, forcing the Jiaoji people to not dare to make any moves. If necessary, you can send troops to land directly from the sea and cooperate with the army to occupy the entire Jiaoji. Hearing Yang Chendong's imposing words, Nie Tong also became very excited. Yes, please rest assured, sixth young master. After transporting these people back, I will lead my 2nd Marine Regiment to carry out your orders. We will also embark on the sea and attack the territory south of Jiaoji. Yang Chendong nodded. Nie Tong nodded. Nie Tong said excitedly, but he just wanted to participate in the war and contribute more merits. Yang Chendong, who understood this, completely laughed. There's no rush. Everything will depend on the progress of our army before we make a decision. In short, just wait for the news. When we need you all, don't drop the ball. In the previous life, when Yang Chendong was still called Yang Dong, the term, drop the ball, was often used in the army. Even after coming here, he could not change it. Because of this, when someone asked him what it meant, he would purposely explain it. The general idea was that at the crucial moment, one would lose one's true colors and not be able to perform well, resulting in failure. Nie Tong, who had also heard of the term, drop the ball, immediately patted his chest and said with a tone of assurance. Sixth young master, rest assured, our navy will definitely not drop the ball. Huh, that's good. Yang Chendong's hearty laughter rang out, echoing across the coastline of Xianan village. Yang Chendong had already escorted the 40,000 Han captives to Xianan village, completely shaking off their pursuers. However, Ruan Gengwang, who knew nothing about this, was still excited because he thought that he had captured the main force of the mercenaries. That's right, the scouts of the Jiaoji army were quite capable. Regardless of whether the clues were intentionally left behind or accidentally discovered, they had their eyes on a group of mercenaries, which was the 3 battalions Yang Chendong had purposely left behind to act as a distraction. The one in charge of leading the way and attracting the enemy's attention was the commander of the 3 battalions, Cold Front 1st Battalion Commander Wu Sheng. Accompanying him on this mission were 4 companies under his command and 2 battalions of auxiliary soldiers. In total, there were 12 companies of 1,200 soldiers. A team of 1,200 people was not small, especially when they separated. Yang Chendong had purposely used most of the ammunition on them. With their strength, even if they were to face off against the 30,000 people led by Ruangengwang, they would still have the confidence to fight. However, Wusheng did not do so. He knew what his mission was, which was to attract the attention of the Jiaoji army. As long as he could lure them out and successfully make them stay in the Langsun region, it would be a great achievement. In order to achieve this goal, he did not move very quickly and purposely left behind all sorts of clues. Even when he was cooking, he made many stoves, giving off the feeling that he was the main force. Ruangengwang, who did not understand the mercenaries at all, did not know. He had only seen the traces left behind by the enemy along the way and thought that he had caught a big fish. Furthermore, the enemy had been constantly running and had not faced him head-on once. This created a misconception that after the two battles, the enemy had suffered heavy losses and should not have the ability to fight with him. Since there was such an opportunity to beat the enemy while they were down, how could he not grasp it? Not only did he lead 30,000 men to chase after the mercenaries, he also sent someone to report to the king, requesting them to send out troops as well. He wanted to eliminate the mercenaries who dared to intrude into the Langsun region. When the news reached the ears of King Li, he was naturally shocked. When the great Ming dynasty was on the verge of falling apart, there was actually someone who dared to have designs on him. This was truly out of his expectations. Since there was someone who did not know life from death, he did not mind fulfilling their wishes. In fact, in order to show off his strength, he even sent out his general, Chen Heijin. The Chen family was the second largest family in Jiaoji. Chen Heijin was also one of the top figures in the Chen family. However, after he became famous, he completely sided with the Li family. This caused him to be known as Chen Haizi due to his ruthlessness. This time, when he found out that there were enemies who dared to enter the Langsun region, and with the king's orders, how could he be courteous? He immediately led his 30,000 elite troops, known as the Black Soldiers, to the north of Hanoi. Not only did he want to stop the mercenaries from entering Jiaoji, he also wanted to use this opportunity to wipe them all out. With just 3 battalions of soldiers, Wusheng was able to mobilize 60,000 soldiers. In addition to the 20,000 Jiaoji soldiers who had died in battle, it was equivalent to holding back 80,000 soldiers. For Jiaoji, which only had around 300,000 soldiers, this was enough to lure the tiger away from the mountain. Since the tiger had been lured out, it was time to enter the tiger's den. After resting in Xianan village for 2 days and sending the 40,000 soldiers away, Yang Chendong brought his 20 battalions and 5 companies of soldiers to Chu-Yi city. Chapter 475. In order to avoid being discovered by others, especially when he knew that Jiaoji also had ships that were relatively small in comparison, he did not bring his army along the coastline. He even gave up on Hongji City and Haifeng City, which were easier to traverse, and went straight through the rainforest. Thanks to the specialized training they had received beforehand and the fact that the soldiers were fully equipped, they were not afraid of the poisonous insects in the forest. Although the journey was a little tiring, there were no accidents. In just 3 days, they arrived at the forest 10 miles outside of Chu-Yi city. The scouts had already been sent out. All that was left was to wait for news. Yang Chendong ordered the army to rest on the spot. Other than using their own small pots to cook instant noodles, they were not allowed to light any open fires. After eating and drinking their fill, they were to sleep immediately to replenish their energy. Yang Chendong had already made a decision. They would launch a surprise attack tonight and take down Chu-Yi city. Now, all they had to do was wait for the reports from the scouts. Those who did well would be rewarded and those who did wrong would be punished. This was the iron rule of the management of the cold front. During the battle in the rainforest, many soldiers had contributed greatly and were promoted. Scout Su Yunsheng was one of them. Due to his outstanding performance, especially when he hit Ruan Yongyang, Yang Chendong's plan could be carried out better. He was promoted from the position of squad leader to platoon leader. Don't underestimate this promotion, and don't underestimate the fact that it was just a platoon commander position. Once Su Yunsheng entered the cold vanguard, he could easily be promoted to a company commander. On the other hand, if he entered the auxiliary troops, he could easily become a battalion commander. This was what it meant to be one rank higher. For example, if the soldiers in charge of protecting Yang Chendong in the 1st and 2nd Guards wanted to leave the company, they would at least be promoted to platoon leader. Once they displayed sufficient management skills, it was not impossible for them to be promoted to company commander or even battalion commander. Su Yunsheng, who was promoted, was full of enthusiasm. This time, he took the lead in infiltrating Chu-Yi City to investigate. Under his skillful command and the excellent performance of the scouts, the situation in the city was quickly dug out. They even dared to kidnap a lone centurion. Since they knew that everything was going well, they might launch a night attack on Chu-Yi City tonight. They just wanted to capture an insignificant centurion and make him disappear for a few hours. There shouldn't be any problems. It was from this captured centurion that they found out more about Chu-Yi City. They even drew a detailed map of the Jiaoji army's military strength distribution and sent it back to the scouts. Looking at the freshly drawn military topographic map in his hand, Yang Chendong couldn't help but be overjoyed. He exclaimed, "Good." There was a saying called "God bestows rice." It referred to certain people who were born to eat a bowl of rice in a certain industry. Su Yunsheng, for example, gave Yang Chendong the feeling that he was born to be a scout. Of course, this was not all due to the scouts. If the people from the Security Bureau had not infiltrated Chu-Yi City in advance and lived here for a period of time, they would not even have a safe place to stay in the city. How would they be able to carry out their work so smoothly? Yang Chendong's face was full of joy and even a little excited. When Hong Jin saw this, he felt a myriad of emotions. Hong Jin was a captive general. Although he really wanted to die a heroic death like Ruan Yongyang, when he thought of the responsibility he bore and the fact that the Hong family had the upper hand at the last moment, he survived without any dignity. For a surrendered general like this, if it were any other opponent, they would first ask you some questions. Once they obtained what they wanted to know, you would be like a piece of bone without any flesh. That was the result of being abandoned. If the result was better, you might be able to barely survive. However, you could forget about your dignity. If the result was worse, it was normal to be killed after using up all your dignity. After all, you surrendered and were allowed to live for a few more days, which was considered to be doing you a favor. However, when it came to Hong Jin, it was completely different. Not only had he not been abandoned, he'd instead obtained a certain level of respect. It was even to the extent that Yang Chendong had promised him that he'd ensure the safety of his Hong clan, and if his performance was good, then Yang Chendong might even consider entrusting him with an important task. Being able to keep the family safe, although it was not wealth, already made Hong Jin very excited. Not to mention that there might be better opportunities to display his talents in the future. In the past few days, he had been walking in the dense forest with the mercenaries. After witnessing their valiant marching speed and the powerful firearms in their hands countless times, Hong Jin smiled bitterly in his heart. When he thought about how he had thought of eliminating the mercenaries with the advantage of numbers, now it seemed that he really did not know the immensity of heaven and earth. The strength of the mercenaries, especially their iron-like military discipline, and the sense of harmony between the soldiers, was something that Hong Jin had seen more than once. After the soldiers had gone to bed, Yang Chendong personally went to patrol the camp. He even saw him personally covering the soldiers with blankets that were kicked off by their feet. Hong Jin still remembered how shocked he was when he saw that scene. He had never thought of such a thing before. He had never seen any general in Jiaoji do such a thing. Most generals would indulge themselves in wine and women at night. Occasionally, there would be a few self-disciplined ones who would go to bed early. Who would think of the ordinary soldiers? It was no wonder that he could lead this mercenary army to become invincible. Just based on his heart and pressure, Hong Jin was far inferior to the generals he had met. For a moment, Hong Jin even had a thought. Could he seek refuge with Yang Chendong? He had a feeling that such a person would be able to achieve great things. If he could grab hold of him earlier, he might be able to make a name for himself. When he brought up this thought when he followed Yang Chendong, the sixth young master pondered for a moment before replying, "It's good that you have the intention to seek refuge with us. However, it will be difficult for you to achieve the same status as the Han people. At most, you will only be a general in a second-rate army. No matter how hard you work, it will still be the same. Are you still willing?" "Yes." Hong Jin agreed without hesitation. He could tell that the sixth young master cared a lot about the Han people and the Ming people. In comparison, he would not treat the other races equally. However, it did not matter. If he could become a general in a second-rate army, it should be a very prestigious thing. At least he would be able to ensure the safety of the Hong family. Hong Jin revealed his intention to seek refuge. Naturally, he did not hide anything from the rest of the work. Through his words, Yang Chendong had a more detailed understanding of the situation in Jianghu. It was as if his primary target was Chu-Yi City. It was also because he heard Hong Jin's words that he knew that the general guarding Chu-Yi City was an idiot. He was just relying on the fact that he had the most powerful bloodline of the Li family. He was used to abusing others. Because of this, the soldiers in the city lacked training and did not have any actual combat power. With such a weak enemy, Yang Chendong decided to choose this place as the breakthrough point. He would attack from here and then throw a big stone into the clear water of Jianghu to mess up the situation and find a better opportunity to attack. His suggestion was accepted. This was an attitude of trust. Hong Jin was naturally overjoyed. He thought that he had made a contribution. However, when he saw the map of Chu-Yi City sent back by the scouts, he took a deep breath. At this moment, he knew that even if he did not say those words, the other party would still be able to understand the situation in the city clearly. For a moment, he had to keep a low profile. He no longer dared to consider himself as a meritorious person. After the map of the city was brought over, Yang Chendong immediately called for a meeting with the regiment commanders and battalion commanders. They began to distribute their respective tasks. Under Yang Chendong's military orders, in less than an hour, all the troops had received the tasks that they were supposed to do. Everyone knows what they are supposed to do, right? After distributing the tasks, Yang Chendong stood under the tree that was called the temporary headquarters and looked at the more than 20 regimental and battalion commanders surrounding him. "Yes." With a low voice, all the commanders replied in unison. "Very good." Yang Chendong also spoke in a suppressed voice. His voice did not need to be too loud as only the commanders could hear him. "When you attack and occupy Chu-Yi City, you must remember that you can kill the soldiers and civilians who resist. As for those who surrender, there is no need to kill too much. What we lack the most now is people." "Sixth young master, what if the commoners resist with all their might?" a battalion commander of the auxiliary barracks asked. He had heard before that when the great Ming Dynasty attacked and occupied Jianghu in the past, the entire population was a soldier. Sometimes, even the children of the elderly would fight back with all their might. This caused the great Ming army to suffer quite a bit. Didn't I say just now? As long as they resist, regardless of their identity, kill them. When Yang Chendong said this, he recalled the self-defense counterattack in his previous life. At that time, who knew how many lovely people had died in the hands of the elderly, women, and children? However, even so, he still forgave them in the spirit of humanitarianism. Yang Chendong would learn from the experience of his predecessors. If these people did not resist and obediently listen to him, it would be fine. However, if they wanted to resist and hurt his soldiers, then sorry, he would have to kill 100 of them. In any case, in this era, the spread of information was very slow. There was no need to worry about how others would criticize you. As for human rights, even the great Ming Dynasty divided people into different grades and ranks. What the hell is human rights? Chapter 476. Of course, he would only kill those who resisted. He would not kill those who surrendered. Firstly, he did not want Leng Feng to become a cold-blooded killing machine. Secondly, the current development required a large number of people. This hole would be filled by conquering Jiaoji. With Yang Chendong's reiteration, all the officers understood what they had to do next. They immediately turned around and made their preparations. Yang Chendong did not forget to tell Hong Jin, who was watching from the side, "You are from Jiaoji. If possible, you can do more of everyone's work. I will arrange a squad of soldiers to protect you from harm." "Thank you, Duke of Loyalty. Hong Jin will do his best." Hong Jin replied respectfully. After all, he was just an external general. He did not even have the right to address Yang Chendong as the sixth young master. He could only address him as Duke of Loyalty to show his allegiance. The sky was getting darker. Leng Feng, the auxiliary soldiers, and the temporary auxiliary soldiers had already rested and were making their own preparations. The next thing they needed to do was to wait until the time was up before they began to attack the city. It was not accurate to say that they were attacking the city. This was because at midnight, when many people had already fallen asleep, the south gate of Chu-Yi City was opened from the inside. Then, a bright torch circled the city gate 3 times. This was the signal to enter the city. It meant that Su Yunsheng and the scouts had taken control of the city gate. The Yang family troops who were already prepared entered the city in an orderly manner. After they carefully entered the city gate, they were led by the scouts who were already prepared and rushed to their respective destinations. After entering the city, they went straight to their target. Everything was done in an orderly manner. Many people did not know that the army had entered the city. It was not until gunshots were heard from the granary where the military supplies were stored that the whole city became lively. Li Zhe was the general of Chu-Yi City who had the bloodline of the Li family. While he was still lying on the big warm bed with a beauty lying beside him, the door of the bedroom was suddenly pushed open from the outside. This movement instantly woke him up, and he shouted loudly, "Who is it?" General, someone has broken into the city. Let's run." The ones who came were the guards of the general's mansion. To be able to become a general's bodyguard, they were naturally 1 in 100. Their vigilance had always been stronger than ordinary citizens and soldiers. When the city suddenly became chaotic, they felt that something was wrong. When they came out of the residence and came to the street, they vaguely saw an army approaching. They knew that it must be the enemy. After all, it was impossible for friendly forces to enter the city in the middle of the night without even saying hello. It was precisely because they knew that it might be the enemy that they rushed into the general's bedroom and shouted without regard for their status. Enemy? Where did the enemy come from? Li Zhe, who was still not fully awake, asked in confusion. But just as he finished speaking, before the guards could even open their mouths to explain, a very crisp gunshot suddenly rang out from the courtyard. The moment the gunshot rang out, the few people in the bedroom instantly felt their hair stand on end. They did not expect the enemy to break into the residence so quickly. Li Zhe, who was startled by the gunshot, was stunned for a moment. He did not ask any more questions and hurriedly put on the clothes he threw on the side of the bed. As he was putting on his clothes, he shouted, "What are you all standing there for? Hurry up and gather your men. Open up a bloody path for the general." Li Zhe was still shouting when the sounds of killing and gunshots outside were getting closer and closer. Just as he finished putting on his clothes and did not forget to hang his sword on his body, the guards outside the house started wailing one after another. As the only general's residence in the city, it was naturally the focus of attention. The ones carrying out this mission were Chen Bo's troops from the 2nd Battalion of the 2nd Regiment of the Cold Vanguard. First, they completely surrounded the place. Then, they broke down the door and entered the mansion. Once they entered, anyone who raised their weapons and refused to surrender, regardless of who they were, whether they were male or female, old or young, they were all shot to death. The 95 style continued to spew out tongues of fire in the night. Soon, the number of Jiaoji soldiers who fell under the muzzle of their guns increased to 100. Under the waves of gunshots, the people finally became obedient. They knew that the people who came were not joking with them. Some of the more courageous ones who were afraid of death threw their weapons to the ground and squatted on the ground obediently, becoming captives. After a series of gunshots outside the door, a few tall figures rushed into the bedroom and saw General Lija trembling all over. Lija was only promoted because of his family's connections. He had never fought a proper battle before. How could he have seen such a scene? Seeing the guard who reported the situation to him just now lying in front of him covered in blood, his mind was completely blank. He did not know what to do. Remove his weapon. Although the Cold Vanguard did not know Lija and did not know what he looked like, they could tell that he was a big fish just by looking at his clothes. The squad leader who rushed in immediately grabbed Lija's sword and pressed him to the ground. Following the capture of Lija and the capture of the general's residence, the entire Chu-Yi city basically gave up all resistance. From the beginning to the end, it only took 3 hours to take control of the city. When Yang Chendong entered Chu-Yi city under the protection of the 1st and 2nd Guards, the city had already been completely taken over. Other than the Yang family soldiers who were cleaning up the bloodstains and corpses on the streets, there was only one soldier who was standing guard 20 meters away. Luopa had also brought a group of officers to wait for Yang Chendong. When he saw the 6th young master coming over, he jogged forward to report the results of the battle. Reporting to the 6th young master, the entire Chu-Yi city is already under our control. Right now, the 4 gates are tightly shut. Without orders, no one can leave. The general of Chu-Yi city, Lija, has also been captured alive by us and is now being locked up in their residence. In this battle, we have killed approximately 1,300 people who resisted and seized all kinds of military resources. Listening to Luo Po's report, Yang Chendong nodded from time to time. After the other party finished, he said happily, "Very good, you have done well. Your military achievements will be recorded and you will be rewarded according to your contributions. By the way, how are our casualties?" Reporting to the 6th young master, "We only injured a dozen temporary auxiliary soldiers. No one died in the battle." When he said this, Luopo was still very excited. Not bad. Hearing that there were no soldiers who died in the battle, Yang Chendong's face flashed with obvious satisfaction. Nowadays, the soldiers were more and more able to keep up with the rhythm of the war. During the battle in the forest of Langsun, more than 20 auxiliary soldiers and temporary auxiliary soldiers were killed or injured. To be able to win this battle with 0 casualties was enough to make people feel gratified. Seeing that Yang Chendong was in a good mood, Political Commissar Kong Jie, who was standing at the side, hesitated for a moment before taking a small step forward to report. 6th young master, we have found many Han people in the city. They are not living well. Many of them don't even have clothes to cover their bodies. What do you want to do with them? Yang Chendong's originally gratified and happy expression completely disappeared at this moment. He thought that the Han people in the outside world would not be living well, but it was out of his expectations that they could not even wear clothes. How many people are there? Yang Chendong's voice sounded in a low voice. We have roughly calculated, there are about 1,000 people. There should be some that we have not found yet. After all, this time, their main objective was to attack and occupy the city. They really did not have much time to observe other things. Where are they? Bring me to them. When Yang Chendong heard that there were so many people and that not all of them were found, his frown deepened. According to Hong Jin and the information sent by the Security Bureau, Chu-Yi City was not very busy. Even the entire population of the city was only 20 to 30,000 people, and this was in addition to the 2,000 city guards. However, there were more than 1,000 people who were captured. Wouldn't that be 20 to 30% of the total population? It was definitely not a small number. Yang Qindong wanted to take a look at the captured Han people. Kong Jia originally wanted to stop him, but he thought that there were some things that should be seen clearly by the young master. This would be of great help to the sixth young master. He nodded and led the way. Under the protection of a group of Lingfeng, Yang Qindong turned 2 corners and arrived in front of a large courtyard. Looking at the courtyard, he knew that this was the place where the Han people gathered. Kong Jia was extremely meticulous with his arrangements. By placing the Han people here, he could prevent them from being harmed by the other Jiaoji people. When they arrived at the entrance of the courtyard, Political Commissar Kong Jia's footsteps were obviously heavy. He turned back and looked at Yang Qindong and said, "Sixth young master, you have to be mentally prepared. Go in, I am ready." Yang Qindong's expression did not change. In his previous life, he had completed a mission in the war-torn lands of Africa. What kind of people had he not seen before? Although Yang Qindong thought that he had seen a lot, when he really entered the courtyard and saw the Han people sitting around the bonfire, his strong spirit was greatly shaken. What he saw could no longer be considered as humans. If he had to compare them, they were like apes that had not fully evolved. Yes, they were weak and skinny. They were as thin as firewood, and their eyes were wide open. They were looking at Yang Qindong and his group with fear. These people were generally not tall, and some of the adults were obviously hunched over. This was clearly the side effect of working hard for a long time, and their bodies could not bear the burden. There were also some old people who not only had dark skin, but their bodies were also extremely thin and weak. Looking at the small half of their arms that were exposed when they put on the unsuitable clothes that they had found from God knows where, they were probably not much thicker than a 6 or 7-year-old child. Chapter 477. There were also a small number of children. They were extremely thin and weak. At a glance, one could tell that they were malnourished and their body proportions were severely out of balance. There was also a young man who looked like he was 6 or 7 years old. He weighed less than 15 kilograms. His large head formed a stark contrast with his small body. If there was a video camera here, if this scene could be recorded and shown to the other Han people, the women would cry non-stop, and even the men would feel very uncomfortable. Just like the group of people standing beside Yang Qindong. Many of them had tears in their eyes. Some of them even had bloodshot eyes. They looked as if they were about to kill someone. These Jiaoji people deserved to be hacked to death. Tiger's mane was very close to Yang Qindong. Others might have considered the presence of the sixth young master and would hesitate to say something. However, Tiger's mane did not need to. He directly said what was on his mind. With him taking the lead, the other people immediately followed suit. They were all cursing the Jiaoji people. Some even scolded the great Ming Dynasty. These people were all kidnapped by the Jiaoji people. To think that they kept saying that the world was peaceful and the people were rich. If that was the case, why didn't they save their own people? To let them suffer here, was this something a great country would do? Yang Qindong was also in a bad mood. However, he knew that similar things did not only happen in Jiaoji but also in other small countries. Not all Han people were respected, and not all Han people lived with dignity. It was just like the memories in his mind. The status of the Asians in the future was not high. They even felt inferior to the Asians. They felt that they could not compare to the Europeans. Even if the country was strong, this mentality was still in the hearts of many people. It was precisely because the country was not strong enough that it was impossible to talk about fairness in many things. Whether it was in the military, science and technology, or business and agriculture, this could be especially reflected. However, since he was blessed by the heavens and came to this world, and brought along the most powerful Tsang, Yang Chendong was determined to change this fate and situation. What he wanted was that no matter where he went in the future, as long as he said that he was a Han, people would look up to him. As long as he said that he was a Han, people would not have any thoughts of bullying him. On the contrary, they should be the ones feeling inferior. For this goal, Yang Chendong was willing to fight for the rest of his life, even if it was destined to be a long process. Give them enough food and clothing, then invite them to the largest square in the city tomorrow morning. Yang Chendong gritted his teeth as he finished speaking. Then, he turned around and left. Clearly, he was unwilling to stay in such an environment for even a moment longer. It wasn't that he despised these poor Han people, but he was afraid that he wouldn't be able to stop himself from slaughtering all the Jiaoji people in the city. Behind him was a group of Ling Feng's higher-ups and guards. Compared to when they first arrived, their expressions were solemn and even frighteningly cold. A ruthless aura was naturally emitted from their bodies. Even after they left the courtyard and arrived at the main street, the auxiliary soldiers and temporary soldiers in charge of guarding the place could still clearly feel a monstrous killing intent. In the past, some of the officers of Ling Feng felt that it was inhumane for the sixth young master to want to exterminate Jiaoji. After all, the influence of the doctrine of the golden mean over the years wasn't ineffective. They were particular about harmony and wealth, about not leaving a line for others so that they could meet again. They were particular about being merciful and forgiving, and about winning people over with virtue. However, when they saw the scene of the Han people living in the city, their thoughts changed and were shaken. Since others didn't treat the Han people as humans, then don't blame the Han people for not treating you as humans. You brought this upon yourselves. Since you committed this sin, then you have to pay for it yourself. And such thoughts were constantly accumulating. Slowly, it would form a huge doubt that would eventually explode. The next morning, the meeting at the largest plaza in Chu-Yi City was the trigger point that Yang Chendong prepared for everyone. It wasn't enough for him to prosper the Han people alone. He needed the support and approval of more people. Although he could use his authority to force Ling Feng to do so, there was still a hint of coercion in the end. It wasn't something that everyone was willing to do. This would make it hard for things to be handled and carried out at a lower level. Yang Chendong hoped that he wasn't the only one who saw this point. Others would also see this point and willingly submit to him. That way, he would be able to achieve twice the result with half the effort. Under Yang Chendong's orders, all the civilians and captured soldiers in Chu-Yi City were rushed to the plaza the next day. When they arrived, a temporary wooden platform had already been set up. In the center of the plaza, there were a few huge wooden pillars with people tied up. Any civilian who had lived in this city before could recognize that the person tied up in the middle of the wooden pillars was General Chu-Yi Li Zhe. As a member of the Li family, Li Zhe had been tyrannical ever since he came to Chu-Yi City. Not only would he bully the Han people, he would also oppress the Jiaoji civilians as much as possible. This caused his reputation to be very bad. However, who asked him to be a member of the Li family? Most people were angry but didn't dare to say anything. So when they saw him tied up there, many people, including many Jiaoji civilians, were very happy. This was what they meant by, those who commit too much injustice will bring about their own destruction. If one day you separated yourself from the people and always put yourself on a pedestal, then the day you fall would not be far away. The person tied up in the middle was Li Zhe. On his two sides were his loyal subordinates and some black-hearted merchants in the city. It was precisely because of their protection that the common people's lives were so miserable and grievances could be heard everywhere. Because of this, even though there were more than 30,000 people in Jiaoji near the plaza, there wasn't much chaos. This made some of the officers who went to the courtyard last night feel like they couldn't vent their anger. More and more people gathered. Even some Jiaoji soldiers were brought here. Compared to the civilians, who were still relatively free, they were much more miserable. There were 20 people tied up on a rope. They were brought here with their bodies pressed against each other. It was as if they were wearing candied haws on a stick. Behave yourselves. Kill anyone who doesn't behave. The Leng Feng soldiers who were watching over them spoke with ferocious expressions, causing the Jiaoji soldiers who had witnessed their might to become extremely obedient. Even when they saw their general tied up on a wooden pillar, not a single one of them had any intention of stepping forward. Compared to the state of these captives, the treatment of the 2,000 Han commoners was much better. They could stand near the nearest wooden stake, and even eat the breakfast given by the army while gesturing with their fingers. They appeared to be very comfortable and relaxed. That's right. After the night, when the count of Han people started in the morning, there were a few hundred more people. There were a total of 2,000 Han people. These people spent the night in apprehension. Even though they knew that Tsui City had changed hands and that it was very likely that the Ming army was coming, they didn't dare to take the initiative to step forward. After all, the Ming army was the Ming army. Who said that they would definitely stand up for them? It was only this morning that more of the villagers found them and told them about how they had been treated the previous night. They had food, drinks, and even a good night's sleep. Only then did everyone start to believe them. More people started to come out. Now, they gathered together and wanted to see what these Han soldiers who claimed that they weren't part of the Ming army were going to do. Under the watchful eyes of everyone, Yang Chendong appeared on the platform under the protection of the guards. This uniform was custom-made by the clothing factory in Qiqian City. It was different from the one Yang Chendong wore during the military parade. This time, it was golden in color. The golden threads sewn on it were all real, causing it to be several times heavier than normal clothes. Naturally, when it was worn, it shone with a golden light and looked very beautiful. In the eyes of the old men in Qiqian, the sixth young master was their sky, their king, and their emperor. Naturally, he was worthy of wearing such a uniform. Perhaps this was the thinking of the feudal society. Since he was the only emperor and king, he must wear gold to show it. If it wasn't for Yang Chendong's firm resistance, he was afraid that a golden dragon would be embroidered on the uniform. Thinking about it, this uniform was really no different from an emperor's robe. It could be seen how much these people hoped that Yang Chendong could become the emperor and lead them forward. Now, this golden robe was empty on his body. After borrowing the style of the commander's uniform, it made the young man's heroic figure appear even more upright. When he appeared, his superior aura naturally manifested, causing the originally noisy square to immediately quiet down. This was exactly what Yang Chendong wanted to see. As he stretched his hand behind him, Beta Persei arrogantly brought out a loudspeaker that he had specially rushed out last night. This could play a better role in amplifying the sound. Holding the loudspeaker in his hand, Yang Chendong looked at the more than 40,000 soldiers in the square. He felt extremely excited and shouted majestically, "Long live Leng Feng! Long live the auxiliary soldiers! Long live the temporary auxiliary soldiers! Long live, long live, long live!" After a moment of silence, the sound of an earth-shattering echo echoed. Although shouting "Long live" here, there was no emperor appearing and it was a bit out of place, but it was undeniable that this shout stirred up the atmosphere of the more than 10,000 soldiers. Chapter 478. The excited shout seemed to be contagious, causing many citizens of Jiaoji to have the urge to shout as well. This was human nature. Most of the time, things had nothing to do with them. However, when the people around them were doing the same, they would follow suit. There was no need to ask why, because there was no reason at all. After more than a dozen shouts, Yang Chendong once again placed the megaphone by his mouth. The crowd suddenly quieted down. It was so uniform that it created a huge psychological pressure. This kind of pressure was something that those who had never experienced personally would never be able to experience. Brave warriors, with your combined efforts, we have finally stepped into the Jiaoji nation today. Chu-Yi City is the first city that we have conquered, but it will definitely not be the last. It will not be long before we set foot on this entire nation and completely trample them under our feet. Long live, long live. As soon as his voice fell, tens of thousands of people shouted in unison, shaking the eardrums of everyone present. The megaphone was raised again and the sound was suppressed. Then, Yang Chendong looked at the crowd and began his speech for the day. The rise and fall of the nation is the responsibility of every man. In the long river of history, there are countless heroic deeds. Patriotic figures are shining like stars. During the Warring States period, there was the great patriotic poet Chu Yuan, the national hero Yu Fei, Wen Tianxiang, and so on. They were loyal to the motherland and loved the people. They were not afraid of demotion or sacrifice. They were loyal to the nation and loved the people. They were not afraid of demotion or sacrifice. However, today, I do not wish to talk about how glorious we were in the past, nor do I wish to talk about how great the ancients were. Because right in front of us are our fellow countrymen who have been victimized. Everyone, please take a look at them now. Do they have any pride as Han people? Could it be that when you look at them, you can feel the pride of being a soldier? As he spoke, Yang Chendong pointed at the 2,000 Han people in front of him. Most of them had already put on new clothes with the help of Ling Feng. At the very least, they could cover their skin and prevent it from being exposed. But those clothes were obviously new, and they didn't fit her at all. Moreover, even if she was wearing clothes, it still couldn't prevent everyone from seeing her thin body underneath. Their emaciated faces were telling everyone that they were not doing well at all. Just as everyone was looking at the 2,000 Hans with their own thoughts, Yang Chendong's voice sounded out once more, "No. This is our disgrace. Every day, we proclaim that the world is peaceful and prosperous, but we can't even guarantee the safety and lives of our own people. How can the grand great Ming dynasty have the face to say that? If I must say, they are not fit for the job. They are unqualified. They took the taxes that the people worked hard to pay for nothing. They let the people place their hopes on them for nothing. They became rulers for nothing. They are incompetent. If they can't even protect their own people, how can they talk about peace and prosperity? How can they talk about being a great country? How can they talk about caring for the world? What's even more hateful is that every time a country comes to the capital to pay respects to the emperor, they still have the face to take out large amounts of gold and silver and give them back. They even say that they are friends for generations and that this is the style of a great country. If we let them see the situation of our own people outside, I wonder if they will feel ashamed? Perhaps, perhaps not. However, we cannot place our hopes on them anymore. Since they are sitting in their high positions and not doing anything, then let's get out of the way and let those who are willing to do the work. And we are the people who are willing to do the work. At the very least, with our hard work, we will be able to let more of our own people live better and more dignified lives. At the very least, with our hard work, we will not be bullied or treated unfairly by others. At the very least, with our hard work, the Han people will become the true rulers of the world. Any kind people who want to be on good terms with the Han people will also be able to live a good life. When Yang Chendong spoke up to this point, he had already revealed his ambition. It was as if he did not put the great Ming dynasty in his eyes. However, the Yang family soldiers did not feel that there was anything wrong. In their opinion, no one was stronger than their sixth young master. Since that was the case, it would be best for the sixth young master to lead them. As for those who objected, they would have to experience the power of the guns in their hands. Even if you were made of iron, you would still be blasted into a sieve. Yang Chendong's speech continued. When he talked about personal dignity, he pointed at the Ling Feng brothers who were maintaining order and said, "They are the greatest army. What others can't do, they can do. What others can't think of, they can think of." In the future, with them around, we, the Han people, will become the strongest and most unique people in the world. No matter where we go, we will be respected by others. All the things that others have forced on us in the past, we will take it back 10 times, 100 times, 1,000 times. Today, we will start with the enemies in Chu-Yi City who are hostile to the Han people. Men, bring down the daggers. Under Yang Chendong's shout, a company of 100 Lingfeng soldiers each carried a plate out. On each plate, there was a dagger. There were a total of 1,000 daggers. This was the gift that Yang Chendong had prepared for the Han people. Didn't the ancients say that those who were evil to the core deserved to be stabbed 1,000 times? Well then, today was the real version. After the daggers were taken down, Yang Chendong looked at the 2,000 Han people with an encouraging gaze. Next, we will read out the crimes. After you are convicted, you can take revenge. There are 1,000 daggers here. 1,000 of you can take them and cut the bodies of those who have bullied you in the past. Believe me, no one will convict you. Your actions are completely legal and reasonable. However, do you dare to do so? At the end of his speech, Yang Chendong's tone had become a kind of questioning, but more importantly, he was still guiding them. After being questioned by Yang Chendong, the 2,000 Han people who originally thought that they were here to watch the show were at a loss for words. These people were used to being bullied and treated like humans. Some of them were even born like this. Ever since they could understand things, there was a thought that told them that they were the most lowly people and deserved to be bullied like cattle or horses. Now that there was a possibility that this might change, of course, they would feel uncomfortable. The 2,000 people looked at each other. The children looked at the adults, and the adults looked at the elderly. No one made a decision immediately. What? You don't even have the courage to take revenge on your enemies? Yang Chendong had long expected this scene. After all, many years of habits were not something that could be easily changed. However, when he saw that these people were still so hesitant despite his support, he was somewhat disappointed. Yang Chendong was disappointed. Because of this, there was a sense of loss in his eyes. This scene was seen by the 2,000 people. Although they had only known each other for a short time, at most, it was only the second time that they had met. However, they could truly feel that this seemingly powerful young man was biased towards them. Everything that he did was for their own good. Since he was doing it for their own good, they could not let such a good person down. With this thought in mind, 2 middle-aged men in the crowd finally responded. However, because of the years of oppression, they were still a little timid. Even when they responded to Yang Chendong, their voices were not very loud. If the 6th young master had not been staring at these people, he would not have been able to hear what they were saying. We dare. You what? Seeing that someone finally took the initiative to step forward, Yang Chendong stared at the 2 men with encouraging eyes. As if infected by Yang Chendong's emotions, the 2 men first looked at each other, and then their tone became firmer. We dare to take these daggers to take revenge on our enemies. Good. Beta Persei, send the daggers to the 2 of them. Yang Chendong immediately agreed, and Beta Persei quickly took 2 daggers and sent them to the 2 men. When the 2 of them really held a dagger in their trembling hands, this scene deeply stimulated the others behind them. Immediately, the men and women who also said they dared to step forward. It was only 1,000 daggers, and they were quickly distributed. Some of the children wanted to have a dagger, but it was already gone. This was because Yang Chendong considered that they were still young and did not want to do it personally. He did not want to leave any bad memories in their hearts. Therefore, he only took out 1,000 daggers. With these 1,000 daggers and the protection of the strong Lingfeng, these Han people who had been bullied for many years finally had the courage to rush to the wooden platform and cut Li Zhe's body with their daggers. Instead of stabbing, they cut. This was to end Li Zhe's life by 1,000 cuts. It had to be said that this method was a bit cruel. This could be distinguished from his wailing and howling. But at the same time, it was also a way to vent their hatred. This could be seen from the faces of the people who waved their daggers. Not only did they vent their anger, but they also took the opportunity to hold their heads high. Their courage seemed to have increased a lot at this moment, and confidence shrouded them. Chapter 479. In the following period of time, Li Zhou was not the only one who enjoyed such treatment. The other influential people in Chu-Yi City who were tied up with him also enjoyed the treatment. Their status and identity were mostly obtained by oppressing the Han people. Now, it was time for them to reap the benefits. The screams on the small platform became louder and louder, causing the people of Jianghu who were forced to watch the execution to feel their scalps go numb. Because of this, there was some chaos. Some people even wanted to take the opportunity to resist and instigate others to attack the mercenaries. Since they were already prepared, the sharpshooters of the cold front quickly found the troublemakers. The sound of the 95 style was heard from afar. After killing dozens of leaders, the chaotic scene was completely suppressed. After seeing the soldiers shoot and kill without any explanation, everyone became more obedient for the sake of their own lives. Although they became obedient, it did not mean that they would be let off. As the next step was carried out, under the testimony of the Han people, the people of Jianghu who had bullied them were pulled out from the crowd one by one. Then, they would be put on public trial based on the mistakes they had made. Those who were too vicious were beheaded on the spot. Those who did not commit too serious of a crime were sentenced to a term of imprisonment and would be brought to Qiqian City in the future. As more and more people from Jianghu were brought out, some of the other people were regretting it while some were rejoicing. Those who regretted it were those who had mistreated the Han people. They were thinking that if they had been kind back then, they would not have to be punished so severely now. It seemed that it was better to be kind to others. Fortunately, there were kind-hearted lords who treated the Han people well. Now, they did not have to worry about being accused by others. All they had to do was to live their lives well. The series of activities of testifying, arresting, public trial, and sentencing lasted from morning to night. However, it was still not completed. According to Yang Chendong, such a public trial would take another day. This was because there were not many people in Chu-Yi City. If there were more people, it would take 7 days and 7 nights to finish the trial, just like in Hanoi City, the capital of Jianghu. The public trial would continue tomorrow, and it was necessary to eliminate the unstable elements in the city once and for all. At the same time, it was necessary to build up the confidence of the 2,000 Han people. After all, for a period of time, there were some matters that required their help to complete. However, these were no longer important. Under the suppression of the armed forces, the citizens of Jianghu in the city could no longer cause any trouble. What Yang Chendong needed to consider was what Jianghu would do after he conquered Chu-Yi City and how he should deal with it. Fortunately, the communication system was not advanced. Even if something happened in the city, it would not spread immediately. In other words, Yang Chendong and his men still had time to make all the necessary preparations. After summoning the officers under him, Yang Chendong began to make arrangements in an orderly manner. After an hour, the officers walked out of the barracks. Some of them had satisfied smiles on their faces, just like Chen Bo, the commander of the 2nd Battalion of the 2nd Regiment of the Cold Front. There were also some officers who looked dejected. It was obvious that their unit was not the main attacker. If they were not the main attacker, they would not be able to make great contributions. It was no wonder that their expressions were ugly. The one with the ugliest expression was King Lily of Jianghu, who had just received the news. On the afternoon of the 2nd day after Chu-Yi City was conquered, old Lily, who was in his 60s and taking an afternoon nap with his concubine, was woken up by his subordinates. While he was still looking displeased, as if he would punish his subordinates for disturbing him if it wasn't something important, a piece of news made him turn pale with fright. "Your Majesty, there is news from the rear. Chu-Yi City has been conquered by the mercenaries." Lily, who was not fully awake yet, widened his eyes when he heard this. Then, he acted as if he did not hear it clearly and asked, "What did you say? Say it again." Prime Minister Yuan Chunqing of Jianghu knew that it was not that the king did not hear it clearly, but that he did not want to believe it. He had no choice but to repeat the incident of Chu-Yi city being conquered. This time, Lily heard it clearly. His brain was working at high speed, and his eyeballs were moving in fear. After a while, he asked, "Have you found out who did it?" "Your Majesty, we have not found out. However, I think it has a lot to do with the mercenaries," Yuan Chunqing guessed. Mercenaries? Weren't they surrounded by Ruan Gengwang and Chen Heijin? Where did they find the troops to attack Chu-Yi city? Lily shook his head as he spoke. Obviously, he did not believe that the mercenaries were so powerful. Therefore, he added, could it be the southern Ming army? After all, they thought that we killed their envoy. It is normal for them to seek revenge. Absolutely not. At this moment, Yuan Chunqing said confidently. Then, he explained, Your Majesty, we have arranged our own people in the southern Ming army. If they do anything, they will not be able to hide it from our eyes. Moreover, the southern Ming's opponent is the king of Min Zhuang. Before this disaster is dealt with, how could they divide their troops to deal with us? Lily nodded after hearing Yuan Chunqing's words. He knew that he still looked down on the mercenaries. If that was the case, it seemed that only this mysterious army could make a move on them. However, no matter how mysterious he was still a human. Lily strode to the map of the palace and stood there for a moment before he gave the order Jishu, Beibei, and Longbian cities to send troops to attack Chu-Yi city from different directions. Try to get rid of the invading mercenaries in the city in the shortest time possible. Also, send someone to contact Chen Heijin and Ruan Gengwang. Tell them that we have discovered the main force of the mercenaries here. Tell them to advance boldly and get rid of the enemy as soon as possible. Lily might be old, but he still had a thorough understanding of the situation in Jianghu. The series of countermeasures he adopted were also very appropriate. Prime Minister Yuan Chunqing, who was standing below, nodded. If he was the one making the arrangements, this was the most he could do. He immediately complied and walked out of the room. When King Lily was the only one left, his eyes flashed with anger and killing intent. Mercenaries, since you took the initiative to find trouble with me, then don't go back. Humph. Jianghu was not very big. The advantage of a small country was that things could be spread quickly. As scouts on horses left the city and headed in different directions, a net was formed to deal with the mercenaries. Beibei City. It was located on the east side of Hanoi, the capital of Jianghu. It could be said that it was the eastern gate of the capital. Since it was the eastern gate, its location was naturally very important. To be able to become the general guarding the city, he naturally had some authority. He was Pan Wenfei of the Pan family, one of the 6 great families of Jianghu. Relying on his family's prestige, Pan Wenfei obtained this position. Because of this matter, who knew how many people had talked about him behind his back? He did not know when it started, but he had secretly made up his mind to perform well. When he achieved great merit, he would use facts to slap the faces of those who dared to slander him behind his back. He would let them know that they were wrong. However, many times, having the intention was one thing, and being able to do it was another. If he wanted to achieve great merit, he had to have the opportunity. Previously, when King Lily was persuaded to send troops to the southern Ming Empire, Pan Wenfei had fought to bring troops north. However, how could the Pan family compete with the Yuan family? In the end, he failed. After returning to Beibei City, he could only continue to wait. However, although Beibei City was known as the Eastern Gate of Hanoi, the southern Ming Empire was currently weak. It seemed that it was impossible for them to attack Jianghu's territory. He did not know where his opportunity was and if it would appear again. This was especially so when he received news that Yuan Gengwang's army was progressing smoothly, and he had already captured 50,000 Han soldiers. This made his heart itch even more, and he cursed Yuan Gengwang countless times in his heart, jealous of his good luck. Fortunately, some time ago, news suddenly came from the front, saying that an army called the Mercenary Army had suddenly appeared and fought with Yuan Gengwang. Yuan Gengwang's nephew, Yuan Yongyang, had died on the battlefield. When he received the news, Pan Wenfei's heart was filled with joy. Although they were officials of the same court, there was still a difference in seniority. If Yuan Gengwang could not do it, would it be his turn? It was also from that time that he began to train the army, preparing to replace Yuan Gengwang and go to the front lines at any time. However, what he did not expect was that before Yuan Gengwang's news came, Chuyi city to his east had suddenly changed hands. When this news came out, it gave him a big fright. After sending people to pass the news to Hanoi City, Pan Wenfei began to prepare to send troops. Speaking of which, Chuyi City was the closest to him. Now that he had the opportunity to send troops, no one would fight with him. Didn't that mean that it was time for him to display his strength? As long as he eliminated the enemy from the east, he would definitely attract the attention of the king. In the future, it would not be difficult for him to get promoted and become rich. The more he thought about it, the more excited Pan Wenfei became. In a very short time, he began to gather the troops and mobilize the military supplies. He could not wait to perform well. Sure enough, in less than a day, King Li Li's order was passed down, allowing North Belt City to send troops to Chuyi City. At the same time, they would take back Chuyi City and eliminate the invading enemies. Chapter 480. Who was the enemy? The imperial edict did not state it clearly. However, to Pan Wenfei, none of this was important. What was important was that he could finally lead an army into battle. He had envied his elders for being able to gallop on the battlefield countless times. The moment he received the order, he gathered the 2,000 Jiaoji soldiers who were on standby and left the city. It was not that Pan Wenfei did not want to bring more soldiers out of the city, but he could only mobilize these 2,000 men. With the mentality of going all out in battle, not a single soldier was left in the city. All of them followed him out of the city and headed straight for Chuyi City in the east. At the same time when Pan Wenfei left the city, the armies of Jishu and Longbian cities also began to gather rapidly and set off towards Chuyi City 6 hours later. The only difference was that they only brought 1,000 soldiers and left half of their soldiers to guard the city. The 3 northern cities moved, and the scouts who had been staring at them quickly reported the information to Chuyi City's Yang Chendong. Seeing that the fish had taken the bait, Yang Chendong, who was facing the 3 armies, was not afraid at all. On the contrary, he laughed out loud. Very good, especially the North Belt City General Pan Wenfei's performance. It seems like you are quite accurate in judging people, Hong Jin. Yang Chendong laughed out loud. Hong Jin, who was standing respectfully at the side, lowered his head and replied embarrassedly, I was just lucky to have guessed correctly. It is still the Duke of Loyal and Courageous who gained from strategizing. Previously, Yang Chendong had listened to Hong Jin's analysis of the characters of some of the Jiaoji generals. When he talked about Pan Wenfei, he said that this person was a person who rejoiced in grandiose achievements. He always liked to talk about strategy on paper when he had nothing to do. Because of this, many people had laughed at him. He had never been on the battlefield and thought that he could win the war by manipulating the map. What was the difference between this and deceiving oneself? However, Pan Wenfei only thought that others laughed at him out of jealousy and did not listen to advice at all. As one of the generals, Hong Jin naturally knew about this matter. He reported the matter and proposed that once he learned that Cord City was easily occupied, Pan Wenfei would play his armchair strategist. It was very likely that he would mobilize the entire army and reveal a great flaw. Yang Chendong attached great importance to Hong Jin's words. Furthermore, in his opinion, it was fine even if the information was inaccurate. To be honest, he didn't think much of the 1,200 Jiaoji soldiers. Sending out a cold front battalion or even an auxiliary battalion to deal with them would be a piece of cake. With such confidence, Yang Chendong followed Xin Hongjin's plan and arranged for Battalion Commander Chen Bo of Lengfeng to lie in ambush on the road between Beidao City and Chuyi City. He was only waiting for the enemy to come out in full force so that he could seize the opportunity to seize the city. Now, it seemed that this arrangement was very correct. After praising Hongjin, Yang Chendong turned to the other officers and said, "Since the enemy has made their move, we should also prepare for action. Follow plan number 1 and enter the battlefield." Yes. After the officers saluted in unison, they began to get busy with their own tasks. At this moment, King Lily of Jiaoji had no idea what kind of powerful opponent they were facing this time. Even the enemy had started to move. The Jiaoji army that had been peaceful for over 20 years was now in a state of turmoil and war. The distance between Beidao City and Chuyi City was only about 180 li. Even if the road was uneven and they had to take a detour, it was only about 200 li. In Pan Wenfei's opinion, this distance could be covered in 3 days. In terms of leg strength, the Ming army was more than twice as fast as the Jiaoji army. Perhaps it was because they had lived in the mountains since young, many of them had trained their feet to be as sturdy as iron. Even if they were only wearing cloth shoes, their walking speed was still not slow. They could cover about 70 li in a day. In addition, the weather was perfect. It was still drizzling a while ago, but in the past 2 days, the weather had completely cleared up. The weather was so good, the roads were drier, and the army moved faster and faster. All of this created an illusion for Pan Wenfei that this was the will of the heavens, allowing him to reach Chuyi City faster and achieve the first military victory. The speed of Bei Feng's army was already very fast. However, compared to the 2 battalions led by Battalion Commander Chen Bo and the 2 auxiliary battalions, it was still much slower. Once there was no battle, the Leng Feng's usual training was 10 kilometers in the morning and 10 kilometers in the morning. If the weather was good in the afternoon, they would even do a 5 kilometers warm-up. Under such high-intensity training, no one could compare to him in terms of speed. To the Leng Feng, it was normal for them to cover a distance of 100 kilometers in a day. If the situation was urgent, they could move even faster. Only by knowing yourself and your enemy can you win 100 battles. They did not understand the mercenaries at all. They did not even dare to confirm whether the ones who took down Chuyi City were mercenaries. The fate of the Jiaoji army seemed to have been decided. Needless to say, Beidi City had already been taken down by Yang Chendong. How could their defeat not be decided? Just like now, when the sky darkened, Chen Bo led his 3 battalions of Yang family army to quietly pass by the other side of the mountain range. This kind of irregular movement left Pan Wenfei completely in the dark. He didn't know that his old nest, Beidai City, was about to face the consequence of changing its surname, and he was destined to become a lone army, an army that would never return. In Chuyi City, Yang Chendong was having dinner with 2,000 Han people. The trial conference had ended yesterday. Those who had mistreated the Han people in Chuyi City in the past, regardless of whether they were soldiers or civilians, had all received their due retribution. This left Chuyi City, which originally had a population of 30,000, with only 25,000 people left. A total of 2,000 people were killed and 3,000 were sentenced to death. The entire city was filled with the smell of blood. Even the number of Jiaoji citizens walking on the streets had decreased significantly. Even though the number of people had decreased, the atmosphere in the city had become better. The evil people had all been killed, leaving only the kind-hearted ones. When they met, they would nod their heads to show their friendliness, which lessened the killing intent. In particular, the Yang clan army had never bullied anyone. As long as one abided by the law, even if one bumped into them on the streets, they would not interfere with one another. This made the remaining 20,000 Jiaoji citizens feel much more at ease. In addition, Yang Chendong had ordered the Yang clan army to open up the treasury of Chu-Yi city and distribute the stored food to the citizens on time. This solved the problem of their food supply, and the atmosphere in the city became much more harmonious. Speaking of which, Jiaoji used to be a subordinate of the Great Ming Dynasty, so the citizens did not have a strong sense of conflict. In addition, Yang Chendong had the intention of running this place well. In just 2 days, the security in the city had improved. Setting himself as an example, Yang Chendong would come to eat with the Han people whenever it was time to eat. Under the influence of the good atmosphere, not only did the Han people feel warm, even some of the more daring citizens of Jiaoji dared to come over and take a look at the young demon king who had killed people without batting an eyelid 2 days ago. Tonight, Yang Chendong came to the square to eat with the Han people again, deepening the relationship between both parties. In fact, since yesterday, there were no more than 2,000 Han people gathered here. Under the busy work of Kong Jia and Song Zhe, the 2 political commissars, the houses of the Jiaoji villains who had been killed were vacated for the Han people to live in and use. This allowed more Han people to be allocated their own houses. It was said that once the situation stabilized, the city gates could be opened to the outside world, and land would be distributed to everyone. This gave all the Han people hope. Since ancient times, land was the foundation of the people. As long as they had land, they could grow food, obtain a good harvest, and live on. It was precisely because Yang Chendong was considerate of them and gave them dignity that the Han people liked this young master. Even though many of them had already been allocated their own houses, when it was time to eat, they would still rush to the square to eat and chat with the young master who brought them hope. Facing these people, Yang Chendong did not put on any airs. Instead, he squatted down and ate with everyone. After eating, he sat cross-legged on the ground and chatted with everyone. As for the content of the chat, there was a variety of topics. Since he did not put on any airs and was so amiable, it allowed him to quickly get closer to the people. Following that, when Yang Chendong talked about some matters and policies, he would receive a positive response from the people. After 2 days of interaction, the Han people also knew that this young master was the Duke of Loyalty and Courage of the Great Ming Dynasty. It seemed that he had a lot to say. After some of the bolder ones finished eating, they asked tentatively, "Duke, you guys have taken down Chu-Yi. Presumably, that old fellow Li Li will not accept it. Will they take revenge here?" Just from the way they addressed him, it could be seen how much the Han people living in Jiaoji hated Li Li. Of course, this was also because they had their own dignity after interacting with Yang Chendong and the others for a few days. If it was in the past, they would definitely not dare to say such words. Yes, yes. When this issue was raised, many people's faces changed. It was not easy to have their own dignity and hope for the future. They did not want everything to disappear so quickly. Seeing that everyone was so worried, Yang Chendong smiled. He knew that it was time to reassure everyone. "Didn't you all say that Li Li is an old man? Since he is already old, how can he be our opponent? Moreover, it's not like you haven't seen how powerful our army is. Other than the fact that we have fewer people now, our combat power is very strong. Don't worry, unless the enemy doesn't come, no matter how many come, we will destroy them all. When the war starts, if you are interested, you can go up the city tower and see for yourself. Other people might be in danger guarding the city, but we don't have to." Chapter 481. When they heard that they could go up the city gate tower to watch the battle, some of them became excited. However, when they thought that war was not so fun, they wanted to retreat. However, when they saw Yang Chendong's confident look, they did not feel that afraid anymore. It seemed that they could go up the city gate tower to watch the battle. Looking at the hesitant expressions of these people, Yang Chendong sighed in his heart. The revolution had not succeeded yet. Comrades, you still have to work hard. These Han people had been oppressed for too long. If he wanted them to regain their confidence and become the master of Jiaoji, he would need a lot of time and many things to do. However, since he was here, he had to succeed. Otherwise, if he could not even handle a small Jiaoji, how could he talk about giving the Han people dignity and happiness? How could he talk about conquering the world? Another night passed. The Han people in Chu-Yi City slept very well. They were slowly getting used to this feeling. It was also night time, but some people did not get any rest. They were the reinforcements from the north, Jishu, and Longbian cities. Since the king had given the order, they had to carry it out. In terms of execution, the Jiaoji army was better than the Ming army. Perhaps it was because the Ming army had been split into two. Seeing that it was going to be split into three, the generals had long changed their minds. They were no longer as happy to carry out the orders of their superiors. The speed of the Jiaoji army was not slow, especially in the middle. They had the most soldiers and the highest morale. Under the leadership of General Pan Wenfei, they wanted to achieve the greatest merit. They were the first to set off and were now less than 10 li away from Chu-Yi City. Seeing that the target was right in front of him, Pan Wenfei had a bold idea in his heart. Could he take advantage of the night to attack? If that was the case, he would be able to take down Chu-Yi City before the other reinforcements arrived. That would be the greatest merit. Once this idea appeared in his mind, he could not get rid of it. Pan Wenfei, who was stimulated by the military merit, quickly made a decision. He then ordered the army to start resting. Everyone, eat first and rest well. After 4 hours, we will begin the siege. At that time, all the credit will belong to us brothers. As Pan Wenfei rode his horse through the army, he explained his plan. The 2,000 Jiaoji soldiers were extremely excited. They didn't know how powerful Yang Xie's new army was. They had been staying in Beidai City for a long time, and they thought that they were the strongest soldiers in the world. Under such a mindset, one really dared to think of anything and do anything. However, one never considered whether one had such a big appetite and could do such an important thing. The scouts who had been keeping an eye on the soldiers in the north suddenly realized that they had stopped moving. They were still 10 li away from Chu-Yi City. Logically speaking, this shouldn't be the case. If it were them, they would at least stop at a distance of 5 miles from the city gate to rest and reorganize. This way, they would be able to achieve twice the result with half the effort when attacking the city tomorrow morning. Realizing that something was amiss, the scout squad leader sent a soldier back to the city to report. They couldn't tell what these people were up to, but the 6th young master should be able to tell. In their hearts, they had already deified the 6th young master and thought that he was a god sent down by the heavens. Otherwise, how could they explain the powerful firearms in their hands? They stopped 10 li away and haven't set up camp? In Chu-Yi City, Yang Chendong's expression revealed a look of understanding after hearing the scout's report. After all, he had attended a military academy in the future and had studied countless battles since ancient times. He was already familiar with some of the tactics of his predecessors. Compared to the various three-dimensional battle tactics of the future, the battles of ancient times were sometimes like child's play. How could Pan Wenfei's little plan escape his eyes? They want to copy us and launch a night attack. Very good, since that's the case, don't let them go back. A mature battle plan flashed through Yang Chendong's mind. Originally, Yang Chendong didn't have the idea of swallowing Pan Wenfei's troops, but he did have the intention of severely injuring them. Compared to other people who were afraid that their strength would be exposed in front of others, Yang Chendong did the opposite. He hoped that others would know how powerful he was so that when they fought, it would be twice the result with half the effort. Before they met the enemy, they would already have a 30% advantage in terms of momentum. With this thought, Yang Chendong needed someone to spread the news of the bravery of the Yang family army. Originally, this candidate was Pan Wenfei. It was very simple to achieve this goal. He only needed to severely injure the opponent. The opponent who was scared out of his wits would surely spread the news for him. However, he didn't expect that Pan Wenfei would actually think of launching a night attack. This attitude of not putting the Yang family army in his eyes made Yang Chendong angry, but he also decided to take him down. Since he didn't even have the ability to see this, there was no need for such a general to continue living. As for the matter of spreading the news, it was very simple. Didn't Jishu and Longbian City have a total of 2,000 troops? He just needed to let them spread the news for him. Gather Commander Luo Pe and all the officers above battalion level in the city for an emergency meeting, Yang Chendong, who had a plan in mind, said to Tiger's Mane, who was standing at the side waiting for orders. Outside Chu-Yi City. After more than 4 hours of rest, the 2,000 soldiers from the north were in much better spirits. After eating and drinking to their heart's content, under the leadership of General Pan Wenfei, they groped their way towards Chu-Yi City, which was 10 miles away. Earlier, Pan Wenfei had already mobilized the troops before the battle. He made a promise to the 2 Kiliarchs and the 2 centurions under him. He said that once they were able to take down the city, money, women, and power would satisfy them to the greatest extent. With the general's promise, the morale of the troops was raised. Some of the young generals who were willing to think in the best possible way seemed to have already seen the scene of gold and silver placed in front of them. With such a vision and hope for a beautiful future, the 2,000 soldiers used a speed that was at least a quarter of their usual speed to arrive at a place 2 miles away from Chu-Yi City. Looking up at the top of Chu-Yi City from this position, they could already see the figures of soldiers moving around under the lit torches. Everything is normal. Seeing that there was nothing out of the ordinary, and even the number of guards on the top of the city tower was not many. Thinking about it, there must have been some lazy people who went to rest late at night. And this was the reason why Pan Wenfei wanted to launch a surprise attack in the middle of the night. As long as he grasped the right opportunity, he might be able to launch an attack. Listening to the scout leader beside him reporting the situation in Chu-Yi City, Pan Wenfei, who was officially leading troops into battle for the first time, had a face full of excitement and agitation. Okay, if there are no problems, immediately arrange for the siege. The cities in Jianghu were not very tall. Perhaps it was because very few people came to invade, or perhaps it was because the resources were too scarce, there were not many things that could be used. In addition, there was not much historical evidence, so the city walls of their cities were more symbolic than defensive. For example, the city walls of Chu-Yi City were only 2 zhang tall. It was more than 6 meters high, and it was possible to climb up with a rope. The siege that Pan Wenfei mentioned was the method of using ropes to forcefully climb the city walls. And as long as a large group of people and horses climbed up the city tower and opened the city gates from the inside, they could suddenly enter the city and deal a fatal blow to the enemy. The scales of victory would naturally tilt towards the Jianghu army. After the main general gave the order, a group of 100 people immediately moved forward under the cover of the night. These were the warriors that were carefully selected from the 2,000 people. They were more agile than ordinary soldiers. Once these people climbed up the city tower, it was basically a done deal for them to take down the city. After the elite group of 100 people set off, Pan Wenfei and the rest did not stay idle. The remaining 1,900 people quickly approached the bottom of Chu-Yi City Tower. They were making their final preparations. Once the city gates opened from the inside, they would immediately kill their way into the city and display their bravery and grace. For a moment, Chu-Yi City, which was originally shrouded in darkness, had black shadows moving continuously on top and bottom of the city walls. It was as though a large army was pressing down on the city. Creak! Just as the soldiers climbing the city tower and Bei Feng's troops were moving towards their target, the originally tightly shut west city gates suddenly opened from the inside. The sound of the heavy city gate opening was extremely shocking in the dark night. What's going on? The sudden change caused Bei Feng's troops to stop in their tracks. The soldiers looked at the decarches, the Decharches looked at the centurions looked at the Chiliarchs, and the Chiliarchs' gaze naturally landed on the dumbfounded General Pan Wenfei. At this moment, Pan Wenfei was also at a loss. He did not understand why the city tower opened on its own so quickly. Because of this, he said without any principles, is it because the enemy knows that we are here and knows that they can't defeat us, so they are opening the city gates and surrendering? Even the stupidest person would not believe this sentence. They did not know whether to laugh or cry at General Pan Wenfei's overly good self-suggestion. Charge! Just as the general and the soldiers' faces were sluggish, the sound of footsteps suddenly came from the originally pitch-black gate. After that, countless figures leaped out of the city gate like fish. 1, 2. There were countless of them. At this moment, there was no need for Pan Wenfei to say anything. Everyone understood what was going on. This was not because the enemy was afraid of them and had surrendered. They were already prepared and were about to charge out. Pan Wenfei, who was leading troops for the first time, was indeed shocked by the scene in front of him. In the past, when he was an armchair strategist, the things he did and his predictions were all wishful thinking. For example, in his imagination, when two armies were fighting, they would listen to him. Whoever he wanted to win would win. How could there be such an unexpected event like this happening before his eyes? Chapter 482. Things didn't develop as he expected and Pan Wenfei lacked flexibility. His brain wasn't working properly and he could only rely on a Chiliarch beside him to remind him. General, the enemy is prepared. Should we kill or retreat? Quickly make a decision. We can't retreat. With this reminder, Pan Wenfei came back to his senses and said decisively. The morale that he had gathered with great difficulty would crumble in an instant if he retreated. Then, the army would be defeated like a landslide. Although he might be able to leave safely under heavy protection, this was not what he wanted to see. Since he was already here, Pan Wenfei naturally wanted to show off his achievements by showing up here in such an active manner. With the idea of the brave winning when two armies met, Pan Wenfei, who was still a man, pulled out the saber at his waist and pointed it forward as he shouted the word charge. Despite Pan Wenfei's bravery, his performance was still not enough in front of the mercenaries who were already prepared for this. When he shouted the word charge, there were only a few torches on Chuyi's city gate tower, but suddenly, there were many more torches. It was as if a fire dragon had suddenly appeared and lit up the entire city gate tower. The sudden appearance of the densely packed torches and an endless crowd of people was quite a shocking sight to behold. The appearance of the torches also shocked the elite warriors who were trying their best to climb up the city gate tower. Some of the weaker ones naturally fell from their waists. In fact, other than a row of Ling Feng, the rest of the people who appeared on the city gate tower were all ordinary citizens of Chuyi City. They were summoned by Yang Chendong to watch the battle in the middle of the night. Using the words of the sixth young master, if these people wanted to live here in the future, they must have confidence in the mercenaries. Watching the battle and witnessing the powerful military strength of the mercenaries was like a shot in the arm, allowing them to quickly change. However, under the darkness, how could the soldiers in the north know this? When they saw the black figures on the city gate tower, they instinctively thought that it was the enemy. When they saw that there were so many of them, they naturally became timid. It was also at this time that Ling Feng, the auxiliary soldiers, and the temporary auxiliary soldiers rushed out of the city gates and arrived. Under the unified and deafening roar of kill, the 95 style and 88 assault rifles fired in unison. In just a single exchange, many Beiju soldiers lost their lives. There were only 2,000 soldiers in the Northern Army, and before they could even meet the enemy, 1/7 of them had already died. This kind of fighting spirit could be imagined. Some of the Northern Army soldiers who were responding to General Pan Wenfei's order to charge could not help but stop moving forward. Then, cold sweat broke out on their foreheads and their faces turned ashen. Temporary auxiliary soldiers, it's time for us to perform meritorious deeds. Charge! A few temporary auxiliary battalion commanders saw that the opportunity had arrived. Without any explanation, they shouted loudly and ran forward with their crossbows in hand. They were prepared to fire the moment they got close enough. The saying of an army pressing on the border described the current situation of the temporary auxiliary soldiers. They had already been caught off guard, and many of their soldiers had died before they even met the enemy. At this moment, the soldiers of the north were already terrified. Coupled with the sudden attack of the temporary auxiliary soldiers, at this moment, their morale, commitment, and courage had all disappeared. The only thing they could do was to instinctively turn around and run. However, it would take time for the charging army to suddenly turn around and run. This was the hope of the temporary auxiliary soldiers. They only had crossbows in their hands and did not have the advantage of long-range combat like Leng Feng and the auxiliary soldiers. If they wanted to perform meritorious deeds, if they wanted to join the auxiliary soldiers, they needed to have enough military merits. How to perform meritorious deeds on the battlefield was undoubtedly the best shortcut to becoming a glorious auxiliary soldier. Without effort, there would be no reward. Seeing that the opportunity was right in front of them, a total of 14 battalions of auxiliary soldiers, a total of 5,000 people, ran forward with all their might. There were less than 2,000 enemies. If anyone was a step slower, they would not be able to perform any meritorious deeds. Under such pressure, who would not give their all? The temporary auxiliary soldiers charged forward. Once they got close, the crossbow bolts rained down like rain. Under such a powerful attack, not to mention 2,000 Northern Army soldiers, even 10,000 Jiaoji soldiers would not be able to do anything. Furthermore, they were already scared out of their wits. They definitely could not win the battle. It all depended on who was faster and who was lucky enough to escape. More than 1,000 Northland soldiers had charged forward, stopped, and turned around to flee. Their weapons and armor were scattered all over the ground as they ran. They hated the fact that they were carrying too much and too heavy. Anything that could lighten their load was thrown away. The soldiers turned around and ran. In the face of death, they unleashed their potential. The centurions, Kiliarchs, and even General Pan Wenfei, who were usually lax in training, were the unlucky ones. Without anyone to protect them, they became the last to run. They also became the first targets of the temporary auxiliary soldiers. The crossbow bolts did not have eyes. In order to perform meritorious deeds, the temporary auxiliary soldiers did not care if they were facing ordinary soldiers or high and mighty generals. They only knew one thing, and that was to kill. If they killed someone, they could take the head and claim the credit. With meritorious deeds, they would have the opportunity to become an auxiliary soldier. If they could even become a cold vanguard, that would be even better. The temporary auxiliary soldiers were eager to perform meritorious deeds. Arrows rained down like rain. Poor General Pan Wenfei, who couldn't run anymore, turned around and held his sword, ready to fight. But soon, his pupils began to dilate, and he fell to the ground like a hedgehog. Until the moment he was shot to death, he still could not understand. He still could not face the moment before his eyes. After all, everything happened too quickly. It was so fast that it was easy to think that it was a dream. Pan Wenfei died, followed by the Kiliarchs and centurions. Then, a large number of Northern Army soldiers were caught and shot to death. Only a few of them reacted quickly. They squatted on the ground and shouted to surrender. Only then did they avoid death. A total of 2,000 Northern Army soldiers. In less than 2 hours, the battle was completely over. After counting, not a single one of the 2,000 soldiers managed to escape. This showed how much the temporary auxiliary soldiers wanted to perform meritorious deeds. From the mouths of the captured soldiers, they found Pan Wenfei, whose body was full of crossbow bolts. When Hong Jin saw this scene, he was so frightened that he sucked in a breath of cold air. After witnessing the power of the mercenaries once again, he finally understood why he lost so miserably. Compared to the powerful Jiaoji army in the eyes of others, the Jiaoji army was nothing but a man-eating wolf. In front of the mercenary tiger army, the Jiaoji army was nothing. Pan Wenfei was eager to perform meritorious deeds and had already revealed too many flaws. Even if the two armies were to fight head-on, there would be no chance of victory. In front of the mercenaries, who had strong morale, strong fighting spirit, advanced weapons, strict military discipline, and elite qualities, there was no army in the world that could be their opponent. There were probably very few who were qualified to be their opponent. Not only Hong Jin, but the civilians on the city gate tower were also completely shocked when they saw this scene. Although most of them had not experienced war, this term was only what they imagined it to be. However, they had heard from the older generation that war was either a matter of life and death. As the saying went, a general success was built on the bones of thousands. Victory had always been hard to come by. It required the blood and bones of countless people to accumulate. How could it be as simple as what they saw? One group of people kept charging and the other group kept retreating. How could it be as simple as what they saw? One group of people kept charging and the other group kept retreating. The Han civilians of Jiaoji witnessed the heroic performance of the mercenaries on the battlefield. While they were sighing at how easy it was to win, their hearts were filled with boundless admiration and respect for this army. None of the 2,000 enemies managed to escape. None of the auxiliary soldiers who charged out were killed. Only a few of them suffered from varying degrees of injuries. This kind of result that could be considered as a complete victory shocked the 2,000 Han civilians of Chu-Yi City. It filled them with confidence for their beautiful future. At the same time, some of the Jiaoji citizens who originally had other thoughts also began to give up at this moment, putting away all of their negative thoughts. Hurry up and clean up the battlefield. Set up the Jingguan. Seize the time to rest. There are still enemies coming at dawn. The shouts of the officers rang out continuously below the city gate. Then, groups of mercenaries shuttled back and forth busily. The Jingguan was an ancient burial mound used to flaunt one's martial arts and gather the corpses of the enemies. The reason why Yang Chendong wanted to set up the Jingguan was naturally because he wanted to create a better deterrent effect. If possible, he did not want to target the ordinary Jiaoji civilians and soldiers. What he wanted was the lives of the few people who held the highest positions. He wanted the lives of the foreign races who were hostile to the Han people. If he wanted to rule over this place, he would need the support of a large population. If he killed all of them, this place would become a piece of scorched earth. This was not the result he wanted to see. The night passed in such a bustling manner. The next morning, a Jingguan with close to 2,000 men was set up and placed 5 li away from the west gate of Chu-Yi City. The reinforcements from Jishu and Longbian arrived at this place after daybreak. This was what they saw. The tall Jingguan suddenly appeared in their field of vision, causing the 2,000 Jiaoji soldiers to stop in their tracks. When the scouts they sent out reported that the corpse of General Pan Wenfei was hanging on the city gate tower of Chu-Yi City, they finally knew the origin of this Jingguan. Chapter 483. Based on the information they received, Pan Wenfei's troops from the north had only arrived 10 hours earlier than them. How could they have been wiped out in such a short period of time? If that was the case, what kind of terrifying enemy were they facing? While the 2 reinforcements were analyzing the situation, the 6 auxiliary battalions left the city after a good night's sleep. After yesterday's victory, Yang Chendong intended to increase the combat strength of the auxiliary soldiers. This time, he did not send out the most elite Ling Feng. However, even with 3 auxiliary battalions in each direction, there were only a little more than 1,000 men. They were far from a match for the 2 Jiaoji reinforcements. When the 3 auxiliary battalions suddenly appeared in each direction, the 2,000 reinforcements sent by Jishu City and Longbian City resisted for a while. When they discovered that the advanced firearms in the auxiliary battalion's hands could cause a large area of long-range damage to them without waiting for them to engage the enemy, they finally understood the strength of their opponents when they saw the soldiers in the front line falling to the ground one by one with the sound of gunfire. With such powerful firearms that could take their lives from 300 to 400 meters away, such an opponent was truly terrifying. Run! Without any exciting close combat, the 2,000 Jiaoji reinforcements turned around and fled. Along the way, they left behind about 700 corpses. This was because they escaped quickly enough. If they really fought to the death, these 2,000 men would face the danger of being completely wiped out. The scale of the Jingguan became even larger. Although the Jingguan seemed extremely terrifying, the citizens of Chu-Yi City felt exceptionally peaceful. With the protection of such a powerful army, they could finally put aside their worries about the Jiaoji army's revenge. Although the 2 consecutive battles were not intense, the results were gratifying. After the 2 battles, Yang Chendong made the decision to go deeper into the inner region of Jiaoji. In order to protect the citizens of Chu-Yi City that had already been conquered and to better consolidate the hearts of the people, the political commissar of the auxiliary battalion, Songzhe, was left behind. The mission Yang Chendong gave him was to persuade the Han and Jiaoji citizens as quickly as possible. The day Jiaoji was conquered would be the day they would be put to use. At the same time, 2 auxiliary battalions and 2 temporary auxiliary battalions were left behind. With this military strength, it would be enough to defend the city even if the enemy was several times stronger. After arranging everything in the city, Yang Chendong brought the 3rd Battalion of the 2nd Regiment, the 6 battalions of the Auxiliary Army, and the 14 battalions of the Auxiliary Army, a total of over 7,000 people, and headed towards Beidai City in the direction that Pan Wenfei had come from. At this moment, Chu-Yi City, which was facing Chu-Yi City, had already changed hands. When Battalion Commander Chen Bo of the Cold Front brought the 2nd Battalion and 2 auxiliary battalions to Chu-Yi City, which was still open, the unguarded Chu-Yi City was swallowed up in an instant. Of the 40,000 citizens in the city, less than 2,000 managed to escape. The remaining 38,000 people, including the 3,000 Han, were all locked up in the city. Chen Bo's appearance was like a heavenly soldier descending from the heavens, causing the commoners in the city to close their doors. Everyone's expression changed. The originally bustling city instantly became much emptier, as if it was a dead city, cold and cheerless. Chen Bo did not choose to search every house like he did in Chu-Yi City. Instead, he first sent a battalion of auxiliary soldiers to occupy the city towers and a company of soldiers to guard every gate. Then, he sent men to seal the treasury of Chu-Yi City, obtaining large amounts of food and a small amount of gold and silver. With sufficient food, Chen Bo ordered the remaining battalion of auxiliary soldiers to patrol the streets, maintaining the security of the city. The remaining Cold Front battalion became a mobile force, preventing any large-scale mutiny from occurring in the city. This was something that could not be helped. He only had 12 companies of 1,200 men, and to maintain the security of a city of 40,000 people, coupled with the fact that he was a newcomer, he had to be wary of any enemies that might appear at any time. His military strength was truly lacking. If not for the fact that he knew that the 6th young master would be arriving soon, he would have already thought of leaving after robbing the treasury. The 2,000 citizens of Jiaoji who had escaped quickly spread the news of the fall of Chu-Yi City. 200 li behind them was the capital of Jiaoji, Haniai City. When the news reached there, it caused chaos in the city. If not for the protection of the 30,000 Jiaoji soldiers stationed here, no one knew what would have happened. Jiaoji Palace. King Lili also received the news. His face was filled with disbelief, but at the same time, he was confused. It wasn't just King Lili who couldn't figure it out. Even the officials who had been urgently summoned couldn't figure it out. How could Beidao City change hands without any warning? Why was there not even a basic warning or resistance? What was the defending general, Pan Wenfei, doing? Fortunately, Prime Minister Yuan Chunsheng, who arrived at the end, gave an answer. He said that Pan Wenfei was eager to gain merit, and took all the soldiers in Chu-Yi City to attack. At this time, the news of the Chu-Yi City being placed in the capital had not yet spread. Naturally, no one knew whether Pan Wenfei was dead or alive. However, losing Beidai City was a fact. Just based on this, King Li, who was sitting high above, vented his anger and said, "Pan Wenfei is an idiot. He only knows how to attack and not defend. He is an idiot. Once the war is over, demote him to the rank of Chili Arch." Old Li, who was in his 60s, demoted Pan Wenfei before hearing the results of Chu-Yi City. If General Pan Wenfei knew about this, who knew how he would feel? However, since Chu-Yi City had changed hands, there was no point in punishing Pan Wenfei. What they needed to do now was to take back Chu-Yi City. Otherwise, it would become an existence that could threaten Hanoi City at any time. Who is willing to lead troops to solve the problem of Chu-Yi City? His gaze that was like that of a tiger king scanned the hall of the palace, especially the few generals. Li asked in a low voice. "I am willing." Just as he finished speaking, a 7-foot-tall middle-aged man stood out. This person's gaze was like a pillar. Just standing there, he naturally gave off an intimidating aura. He was the famous general of Jiaoji, Fan Yuhai. Fan Yuhai was the 4th largest surname in Jiaoji and had a lot of influence in the country. The main reason why he could be called a famous general was because of the conflicts between Jiaoji and the Lanzang kingdom, which was today's Laos. He played a big role in it. He led troops to fight against the Lanzang army 3 times and won all 3 times. That was why he was called a famous general. Fan Yuhai being able to take the initiative to stand up made King Li very happy. However, he didn't agree to such a request. In his opinion, the enemy was unknown, and they didn't even know their numbers. The only thing they knew was that they were mercenaries. Under such circumstances, if they sent out a famous general and lost, the morale of the entire country's army would be greatly shaken. Not agreeing to Fan Yuhai's request, Li's gaze landed on another general called Huang Hua. In comparison, this person was shorter. However, he had led troops to fight against the Lanzang army. Although he did not have any outstanding achievements, he had been on the battlefield and seen blood. "General Huang Hua, this king orders you to lead 5,000 troops to Beidao City. Are you willing to accept the order?" Although it was a question, anyone could tell that if Huang Hua dared to disagree, he would not have a good time. This subject is willing to accept the order. How could Huang Hua not see the king's intention? Although he himself was not willing to accept this task, since he was named, he already had no other choice. "Very good. You can lead the troops with peace of mind." According to the reports, the number of mercenaries is less than 10,000. The Liangshan region should be their main force. You shouldn't have to face many enemies. Li comforted Huang Hua. After speaking, he looked at Prime Minister Yuan Chunsheng and said, "Send someone to tell Chen Heijin and General Yuan Gengwang to end the battle quickly and show the might of Jiaoji's army." This subject understands. Yuan Chunsheng bowed. He could tell that the king was unhappy. He decided to immediately send someone to find Yuan Gengwang and tell him to perform well. Otherwise, the Yuan family would not be able to get any benefits. In the vast and boundless Lang Mountain, the scene of a chaotic pursuit was playing out. Yuan Gengwang led 30,000 troops, and Chen Heijin also led 30,000 troops. They were only facing Wu Sheng's Cold Front Battalion and 2 auxiliary battalions, totaling 1,200 people. 60,000 against 1,200, with a ratio of 50-1, the result seemed to be set in stone. However, the truth was the opposite. In the 10 days of pursuit, the Jiaoji army, which had the advantage in numbers, suffered heavy losses. The Cold Front Battalion had gone through special training in the rainforest. When they separated from Yang Chendong's main force, they had obtained a large amount of ammunition. Especially the number of landmines, each of them had 10 of them. In addition, Wu Sheng, as the leader, had given his subordinates the authority to attack in groups. Each group would be split into 2 groups. The squad leader and assistant squad leader would each lead a group. This meant that there were 240 units. Just think about it. In the process of pursuit, they had to face the attacks of 200 units at any time. No one would be able to stand it. It was just like in the rainforest. No one knew when there would be a loud explosion. Needless to say, this was caused by the Jiaoji soldiers behind them stepping on a landmine. If one could not understand the secret signal between the Cold Front Battalion, they would not know where the landmines were. In the rainforest, the terrain was steep and complicated. Everywhere could be a good place to set up a landmine. In addition, the scattered Cold Front Battalion would occasionally launch a sneak attack. It was easy to imagine the situation of the Jiaoji army. Chapter 484. In front of a low-lying ditch, there were 5 Lingfeng brothers lying in ambush around it. The trench was naturally formed. After years of being watered by the rain, soil erosion was severe, causing the water in the trench to be knee-deep. An invisible landmine was buried under the trench. The reason why the landmine was buried here was because the area was surrounded by large trees. In comparison, only this low-lying area was suitable for humans to walk through. During their training in the rainforest some time ago, Yang Chendong had mentioned that such a place was often the only way for humans to travel. The 5 Lingfeng brothers surrounded the trench. There was 1 person on each of the 2 large trees on the left and right. They looked down from above. Not only could they kill the enemy from above, they could also act as sentries. 2 Lingfeng warriors were also hiding in the bushes on the left and right of the trench. They were in charge of catching the fish that might have fallen into the net after passing through the trench. The last person was the leader, the squad leader of the 5. He was in charge of maneuvering. He was in charge of luring the enemy and retreating. Do not underestimate the task of luring the enemy. He could only lure a large number of enemies if he did it well. On the other hand, no matter how good the trap was, it would only be a beautiful decoration if no one fell for it. Squad leader, there are enemies 200 meters to the southeast. Squad leader Lingfeng, who was leaning against a large tree and chewing on a fresh leaf, heard his comrades shout. 15 minutes ago, this squad leader had lured a Jiaoji corporal out. In less than the time it took to drink a cup of tea, he killed all 5 enemies near the puddle. Then, he dragged the bodies of the dead enemies to the bushes to hide them. After doing all this, the squad leader wanted to rest and recover his strength, but he heard his comrades' warning. The enemy was in order. The squad leader, who was resting with his eyes closed, suddenly opened his eyes. Like a venomous snake that had spotted its prey, he arched his body and shot out. Naturally, the direction was southeast. He wanted to lure the enemy over and eliminate them without leaving a trace. With Leng Feng's spear skills, even in an open battle, the Jiaoji army would not be a match for him. However, in this dense forest, there were no logistical supplies. The ammunition that the soldiers brought with them was depleted. In order to complete the glorious mission that the 6th young master had entrusted to them, they needed to conserve their strength as much as possible. In that case, how to lure the enemy in front of them and hunt them down would become a test of their abilities. The squad leader shot out like a catapult. In just a few breaths, he appeared in the southeast direction. Since he had no intention of hiding himself, he was seen clearly by a squad leader of the Jiaoji army not far away. "There's an enemy over there. Follow me, quick." He had been in the rainforest for a long time. From time to time, he could hear explosions and gunshots in the distance, but he had never seen an enemy. This inevitably made Shen Chong feel like he was dealing with ghosts. Now that he finally saw a living opponent, how could he let him go? After a loud shout, the 9 soldiers behind him followed him and chased in the direction where Ling Feng had disappeared. On top of the 2 giant trees, the 2 Ling Feng soldiers who had seen the movements of the Jiaoji army made a hand signal to their comrades below the trees. After informing them that there were 10 enemies, they raised their 95 style and stared at the 2 people in front and behind the enemy. It was impossible to keep an eye on 10 people with 2 guns. However, as long as they kept an eye on the head and the tail, the enemy would not be able to escape. This was common knowledge that they had to master during their training. Due to the appearance of Yang Chendong, the experience gained by countless predecessors in the future had become knowledge that was stored in the minds of the Ling Feng soldiers. The squad leader, who had no idea that he was being targeted, was so excited that he wanted to catch his opponent. He yelled as he led his 9 brothers to chase after squad leader Ling Feng. Under Ling Feng's intentional bait, the distance between the 2 parties was maintained within 50 meters. At such a distance, the enemy would not lose sight of them and would not be able to hurt them with arrows. One had to know that in this environment where there were tall trees and bushes everywhere, sometimes even a bullet would miss, let alone an ordinary bow. As expected, after shooting a few arrows consecutively without hitting the target, the squad leader decisively ordered the soldiers to stop shooting and focus on their legs. They had to speed up and catch up with the enemy who appeared and disappeared like a ghost. As one of the black soldiers under General Chen Jinhe, the 10 of them were considered the cream of the crop in the Jiaoji army. Just like in the rainforest, they were able to run as fast as they could. It was not much different from running on the open ground. Elites naturally had the confidence of elites. It was because of this confidence that they did not give up on chasing after the enemy even though they knew that something was wrong. This was how the truly powerful were. They were not afraid of any schemes and machinations with their valiant strength. The enemy's speed was very fast. Ling Feng, who was leading the way, had no choice but to use all his strength to leave them behind. When he arrived at the puddle, he jumped over the puddle and ran to the other side to hide. Just as Ling Feng's figure disappeared, the black soldiers caught up with him. The squad leader who was running at the front leaped into the air without hesitation when he saw the puddle in front of him. He followed squad leader Ling Feng's example and leaped over the puddle before continuing to run forward. After the 10-man squad leader leaped into the air, the other 2 black soldiers also leaped into the air and leaped over the 2.5-meter-tall puddle. The cold blade warriors who were hiding on top of the tree saw all of this and could not help but feel a little anxious. If these black soldiers could really jump over the puddle, wouldn't it mean that the ambush in the puddle would be useless? Thinking of this, one of the cold vanguard soldiers lowered the muzzle of his gun. He was ready to fire. Although the hit rate of this kind of high-speed enemy was a little low, and it was easy to expose his position, he couldn't care less at this time. Just as the Ling Feng soldiers were about to fire to see if they could hit the black soldiers and trigger the landmine in the puddle, another black soldier jumped up. However, perhaps because he had used up too much of his stamina, his leap was short and his left foot landed in the puddle. It was this unintentional carelessness that brought about a fatal result. A column of water suddenly rushed out from the puddle, followed by a deafening roar. The landmines in the puddles were triggered, and the powerful explosive force of the gunpowder directly sent the 4 black soldiers who were closest to the puddles flying. The powerful explosion caused the black soldiers to involuntarily pause. At this moment, 4 gunshots rang out. The 5 soldiers, including Captain Ling Feng, each fired a shot, and all of them hit their targets. 4 of them were killed in the explosion and 5 were shot dead. In a short period of time, the squad leader was the only one left out of the 10 black soldiers. This squad leader was also impressive. He did not have the slightest intention of running away when he saw that all his brothers were dead. On the contrary, he noticed that the squad leader had exposed his identity by firing a shot. Then, he pounced on him like a ferocious tiger. After killing a black soldier, the squad leader did not have time to turn his gun around when he sensed a black shadow approaching him quickly. Instinctively, the Ling Feng soldier rolled to the side. Thanks to this roll, the long saber that was descending from the sky missed its mark and left a deep saber mark on the ground. The squad leader quickly rolled away after missing his shot. He rushed toward the squad leader, Ling Feng, who was still standing up. The long saber in his hand was like a blender. It seemed like he wanted to perish together with the squad leader. The squad leader, Ling Feng, had just stood up from the ground. His body was unstable and the muzzle of his gun was not fully adjusted. His instincts told him that he might not be able to hit the target if he fired the shot. He might even be injured by the opponent's long saber if he wasted time. Helplessly, he could only continue to lean back and roll backward. The squad leader's reaction was somewhat out of the squad leader's expectation. After knowing that his opponent was strong, he felt the existence of danger. Since his first and second shots did not hit the target, he wanted to find a place to hide. What happened just now told him that his opponent had reinforcements nearby and he was fighting alone. The thought of hiding flashed across his mind. Just as the squad leader was about to dive into the bushes at the side, a gunshot was heard. The squad leader's body swayed a little before he fell to the ground with a plop. Some water droplets splashed when his body hit the ground. The shot was fired by a squad leader who was hiding in a giant tree. He felt that his opponent was trying to escape, so he fired without hesitation. He did not have much confidence at first, but now it seemed that he was lucky. After the gunshot, Ling Feng adjusted his posture and dashed over. The dagger in his hand flashed and plunged into the chest of the black squad leader who had fallen to the ground. Finishing off the enemy was one of the compulsory courses for the squad leaders. When Yang Chendong was training for this course, he once said that they should never take any chances and should not be too confident in themselves. Since ancient times, countless talented people had died because they underestimated their opponents. Therefore, regardless of whether the opponent was really dead or not, they should give the finishing blow if they could. If they couldn't, they should give the finishing blow. They should never let the enemy go just because they wanted to save energy. Otherwise, it would be the greatest crime and irresponsibility to their comrades. You're tuning in to the Unparalleled SwordWill YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.